Into Tuesday evening's edition of Off the Ball. We have got an OTB football special with thanks to Paddy Power between now and 10 o'clock. A little bit later on in the programme, we are going to be hearing from Leeds legend Gordon Strachan about their return to the Premier League after a 16-year absence. Phil Thompson will be judging whether Liverpool still have the hunger to try and go with back-to-back titles. We'll be talking to two former Irish Republic of Ireland teammates in the centre of defence in Gary Breen and Kenny Cunningham about the return to the Premier League. We've got the crappiest of crappy quizzes with a Premier League focus on it. We've got Team OTB members up against each other. We've got John Duggan, Nathan Murphy and Stephen Doyle, and they will be paired up with Vinnie Perth, Stewie Byrne and Kenny Cunningham for the crappy quiz after 8 o'clock. And then after 9, we've got a very special interview. Two ex-Sunderland teammates, Wes Brown and David Myler, will sit down together to look back at their time on Wearside and also to assess how the new season is going to play out, with a particular focus on Wes's former team, Manchester United. So all that to come between now and 10. It's been a pretty busy day on the news front too. To take me through all the action from today, I'm joined by Adrian Barry first of all. Adrian, good evening to you.
Good evening, Will.
And our newsman himself, Richie McCormack, is there too. Richie, how are things?
Young William, how are you?
Yeah, look, I'm good. I guess, Richie, before we even dig into the news round, it's been a pretty big day in terms of the restrictions and what it's going to mean for sport. A lot of confusion in some ways, but sport is kind of becoming more clear as the day goes on.
It is, yeah, and I don't think it has been done any harm by the fact that the FAI, the GEA and the IRFU have come together and effectively have created this super board of bodies that have basically lobbied and wanted to jockey for position and collectively to see when and how sports can best come back. And I think it's something that has been lacking down through the years. I remember talk when the FAI bailout was required, that it's effectively what they paid for the last few years, last few decades, you could probably argue as well, is that they've had a really bad positioning in terms of lobbying and in terms of having the government's ear, for want of a better term. This way, they're acting collectively, they're acting like they're going to go with a one forward motion, and they're acting like they want to get a proper answer and proper set of answers from the government about how sport can properly progress in this country.
Adrian, it seems to have taken a pandemic to bring the GAA, the FAI and the RFU together here.
It's breaking down all sorts of walls, Will, this craziness that we're in at the minute. But yeah, because there was, I'm reluctant to call them solar runs, given that they're entitled, I suppose, in their own individual associations and bodies to make whatever representations they want. But let's go with the term solar run for now. There was a couple of solar runs earlier in the pandemic where I know the GEA certainly at one point wanted to be made an exception of when it came to this one. And it was always going to be a stronger together thing, wasn't it? And it's interesting to see now. It's interesting when you look at it. A lot of what we've done here is to look at what's going on internationally, outside of the sporting thing, but generally with the pandemic and how society is treating coronavirus. We've looked at other countries, learned from how they've, I suppose, done stuff well or not so well, and then taken our time and probably implemented things that way. Which is, I don't know, probably broadly worked for us, I suppose. And you look at what's going on around this particular topic, not that far from home, obviously, just up the road. Is it 400 fans that are allowed into sports games up there?
Which made a big difference. I was watching a bit of the Armagh final at the weekend, and Crossmaglen were defeated, and just even watching the footage back, it's very stark, the difference between the highlights or the matches that you might watch from club championships south of the border currently versus what was happening in Armagh. It mightn't have been the biggest crowd in, but 500 people generate an atmosphere that's simply not there for the rest of the country currently.
Yeah, a 500 at the minute looks like 55,000 because we're just not used to looking at people congregated together. And and I know in the Bundesliga as well this weekend is that they're doing 15. This one makes more sense to me, the 15% of a ground thing or whatever percent of a stadium seems to make much more sense to me, like that, or 20%, which would be 15,000 for Bayern Munich this weekend. And so I kind of understand that, and I think maybe people do understand that more because we're essentially applying the same rule with the best will in the world to what's the ground in Birr, Will?
That's St Brendan's Park.
St Brendan's
Park. The home of hurling and the home of the first All-Ireland final.
Can't believe it.
Before you slander it, Adrian.
I was not going to slander it, but I was going to use it as an example. We're applying the same rules to St Brendan's Park that we are to the Aviva. Am I right?
Yeah, Currently, yeah. I mean, basically any stadium that's over 5,000 will be able to take the 500. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of arguments probably over the next while in terms of health and safety, what actually qualifies for 5,000 or not, because there'll be lots of GA grounds then are probably going to fall right in that limit.
Yeah, and that's looking at, I think, so we could look at it that way. Like, you could draw a line at the stadiums that hold a certain capacity and like funnel a lot of games into them. You know what I mean? Like Fitzgerald Stadium or like Cusack Park in Ennis or Semple or Croke Park, and funnel matches into those stadiums because we know they can hold.
Yeah. That's something I said on Sunday that was going to happen when the GA announced on Saturday, wasn't it, that their Corley had essentially okayed the championships going ahead. There was talks swilling around in the papers that they were going to make this announcement that a certain percentage of grounds above a certain capacity would be allowed to be occupied. And they're talking about that later on in the year. The thought was, at least at the weekend anyway, that they're hoping to have around 2,000 people into the bigger stadia. And if that happens to be the case, like I was saying on Sunday on the show, that they're going to see pretty much all Leinster Championship matches thrown their direction of Croke Park or to the more, to the better equipped stadia. And similarly in Munster, you're going to see Porky Queeve and Semple Stadium pretty much exclusively in use. There'll be no such thing as county grounds. You're going to go for the bigger, the better, and hopefully get a crowd in there to try and at least take some of the sting away financially from these things.
Yeah, look, I think it would make sense in terms of the extra dressing rooms, in terms of if you've got a really big stadium, particularly Porky Queeve, Semple Stadium, Croke Park, the biggest around the country, Nolan Park, O'Moore Park, which are huge capacity grounds. It's very easy to social distance people and to mark off a lot of seats and allow a comfortable couple of thousand people to come in. But things can change very quickly. It was only the end of July, lads, when they were talking about potentially allowing 500 people in, and then that status changed, I think, on the Monday after it had been flown in the papers at the weekend. So a lot can change very quickly on this. Adrian, I'd imagine when it comes to it, League of Ireland clubs will now be looking to try and get people back in. You're going to have the rugby teams looking to try and get people back in over the next while. Even that financial benefit of having a few hundred people in probably makes a club or a league more viable than it is currently.
100%, no question about it. I wonder, because I know even looking at the Leinster situation this weekend, the Saracens game, what I understand is that they're not going to put tickets on sale. There's such a range of grey area with this, that different rules apply to different stadiums and teams and whatever else you have. And I also, one thing I wondered, this might be totally off the I might have jumped off the reservoir here entirely, but bear with me, lads. It's been a long 6 months, so bear with me. I do wonder when it comes to having these discussions around, I was going to say around the cabinet table, but I don't know what that is actually this evening.
It's a nice
Zoom like this. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all, yeah. So I wondered if part of the discussion around it is, like, Will mentioned it was the Armagh County final, which I don't know, watched some of that. People lose the run of themselves at games, right? So, there is a little bit of that sort of wet pub scenario where, it's fine to say to put a certain amount of people into a wet pub because, sure, look, isn't it the same as if they've been in the shop? It's not really. After a couple of pints and you've lost the run of yourself. There's probably a similar scenario when you're at a ground with, 300 or 400 of your closest friends and, your team have just pulled off a Mahari on it and, knocked the effers off their perch and everybody's going bonkers. So I understand. I don't know if that might be totally off the wall, that's a factor, but
stewarding. But basically you just have to take into account what Germany did from the off, which was that they broke down. I think Germany were the first major league in Europe to come back after the coronavirus. And one of the first things they did was they said they were splitting every stadium up into sectors and that only a certain number of people, and this was taking into account players and staff, etc., that only a certain number of people were allowed per sector. And you're going to have stewards having to manage or man the grounds anyway. You'd have to just say that if there are going to be 500 people in a stadium 200 in a stadium of 5,000 or more, then you're going to have 50 there, 50 there, 50 there, and you're going to make sure that not too many of them are on top of each other, and if they are on top of each other, that they're from the one household. I think that's relatively manageable, and I think that's why the figures are being kept as low as they are at the moment.
Yeah, and particularly when it comes to Gaelic games, a lot of the stewards and people who are there on the day are going to be volunteers. And I was listening to Seamus Cheddar Plunkett speaking earlier today. He was in charge of James Stephens in their championship match against Ballyhale in Kilkenny at the weekend, and he was saying that massive credit has to go to those in both clubs and on county boards that have just managed to keep the championships going, to allow actually local games happen, because there was definitely a time during the summer when we felt like there was going to be no action whatsoever. The inter-county season will happen, I think, now at this stage, particularly with the 10 million guarantee which has been given by the government to the GAA to ensure they'll be able to run it. But interestingly, Adrian Barry, and this was in the Irish Examiner, John Fogarty's piece this morning, we could be moving towards every single game in the inter-county championship being broadcast by the rights holders in RTE and Sky Sports.
It's been one of the, like we mentioned earlier on, about the madness of coronavirus, or the developments out of it, I suppose. And that's been one of the most interesting ones, isn't it? Like we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, but like I know that I have personally sort of, and it came to a shuddering halt over the weekend, but very much reconnected with, how my own GA club is getting on at home. And I think, like, obviously they've got a very captive market now as well, because suddenly where before you had like the core of, depending on whatever game you're talking about, like a couple of thousand up to a couple of tens of thousands going to a game, or suddenly at home and looking for a game on Sky or looking for it on wherever, and maybe willing to pay for it. And it does open up new opportunities, I suppose, for broadcasters that way.
Yeah, I know Adrian's referring to Athlon's defeat against Tyrrell's Pass by 3 points on Sunday in the Westmeath semi-final. So Athlon's wait for a 21st title goes on. Athlone, by the way, in terms of streaming and so on, were actually very clever early in the championship. Some of the games that weren't on Westmeath TV, someone set up a phone and they set up a tripod, stood on top of the dressing rooms and managed to actually bring the game. And I think a lot of clubs around the country are doing their own kind of streaming at the moment too. We'll kick off the news round. I imagine that's where we're going to start. A news round is with thanks to Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. Richie, it's those talks between the government and the sporting bodies that tops the news agenda tonight.
Does indeed, Will. The GEA, FAI and IRFU have set up a working group to develop a roadmap for the return of spectators to stadiums. People will be allowed to attend sporting events in limited numbers under the government's new Living with COVID plan announced this afternoon. From tomorrow, 200 spectators will be allowed into venues which would usually have a capacity to hold 5,000 or more. Smaller grounds will be able to admit 100 people, while indoor events will be capped at 50. Representatives of Sport Ireland will also work with the group, which will be chaired by the Aviva Stadium Director Martin Murphy.
I do wonder as well, Adrian, when it comes to this, there's a lot of county finals that are taking place this coming weekend. This kicks in as of midnight, so tomorrow fans will be allowed to attend. I do wonder if when it comes to this Saturday and Sunday, county finals are on, you're trying to decide 100 people from each club to go. I wonder if some county boards might actually hold back and do what Leitrim were planning to do and keep it behind closed doors so that the club secretary doesn't have to draw lots to find out who can go to a game this weekend.
From what I understand, that's what they've been doing, isn't it? Like around the country, doing a lottery essentially.
Yeah, effectively everything was, before it stopped, everyone was putting them in. There was the video that went viral, I think, of a man in Mayo who it looked like he'd put one of the winning tickets behind his back, and that became a meme at one point too. But yeah, genuinely a lot of clubs were just doing a draw. Everyone who wanted to go emailed the secretary. They picked out whatever amount of tickets they were going to get, somewhere between 80 and 100, and that was it. I just wonder if that might put a lot of pressure on clubs with a county board, with say a county final on, and say your team hasn't won for a few years and everyone in the parish wants to go.
Yeah, I think go for it. Jesus, and by the way, like, you needn't have mentioned what county it came from, because I hadn't heard about that before, but I think, in terms of drawing lots for that, we all would have guessed Mayo straight off the bat. It's the first. I don't understand why it's like, what day is it today? Tuesday. Like ahead of a Saturday or Sunday game. Like, let them send in the emails. Like, let them at it. It's not as if the county secretary has to, be the one that's plucking he's not actually having to identify the people. He just plucks them out of a, I presume, a non-transparent vessel.
They're all about transparency, Adrian, here. Let's be careful.
But like I would just like go for it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there are some of the games that they've certainly held back on. Maybe some of the bigger games, and maybe you can kind of understand some of the rationale behind that. But like, if it's just a straight lottery at a club, like, of no matter what the size, like, as long as you've got a good, healthy, you want to get good, make sure that you've got good storage in your Gmail account, really would be the main thing.
Let the Hunger Games for tickets begin. Richie, Tour de France, we still have Sam Bennett in the green jersey?
We do indeed. Nicholas Roach registered his second top 10 finish on this year's tour. He had been part of a breakaway group from early on stage 16 and eventually came home 8th. Roach was over 2.5 minutes behind the eventual stage winner Leonard Kemna. Sam Bennett's lead in the green jersey points race remains untouched at 45, while Primož Roglic stays in yellow with a 40-second lead over Tadej Pogačar. Breaking news as well this evening, Paul Galvin has stepped down as manager of the Wexford footballers. He says his business has undergone significant growth in the past few months and needs attention. He's enjoyed the past 16 months watching, coaching and promoting football in the county since June of 2019. Wexford have appointed Shane Roach as the interim football manager tonight for the rest of the 2020 season. Galvin had started pretty well as Wexford football manager. They had registered 3 wins and 2 losses in their opening 5 games in Division 4 of the Alliance Football League. But Paul Galvin's reign in charge of Wexford tonight is no more. The Republic of Ireland's women's squad have all tested negative for COVID-19. They're in Duisburg preparing for Saturday's European Championship qualifier away to Germany. Ireland's at top of their group ahead of that match in Essen, but go up against a German side who've lost just once in 24 games. But Heather Payne says Ireland won't be overawed by their illustrious opponents on Saturday.
So of course, Germany are a very good side. We know that they've beaten the rest of the group by a lot of goals, but I think if we do have a game plan and we stick to the game plan, and we're a good quality side, we've great players. We know we're going to work hard. We've always worked hard, and we've gotten a result against the Netherlands before, so I don't see how we can't do that against Germany as well. I don't think we're going to get too far ahead of ourselves. I don't think we're going to hopefully not just drop our heads. We'll just have to stick to the game plan and do our best and see if we can get a result in the end.
And Rich, we've had 2 contract sagas come to a close. The first one in North London this evening, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang finally signing that contract with Arsenal.
Yeah, new contract for Aubameyang at Arsenal. The club captains agreed a 3-year deal that will keep him at the Emirates until 2024. Aubameyang scored 72 goals since moving to North London from Borussia Dortmund back in 2018. And Jack Grealish says the ambition of Aston Villa's owners encouraged him to sign a new long-term deal at the club. The England midfielder signed a new 5-year contract with Villa. Grealish was the subject of rumoured interest from the likes of Manchester United in the summer, but he is going nowhere. Villa in second round action in the Carabao Cup tonight, making the trip to League One side Burton Albion. Newcastle entertain Blackburn. Crystal Palace go to the recently relegated Bournemouth, and West Ham play host to fellow Londoners Charlton. Few games already underway. Half time at Pride Park, where it's currently Derby 0, Preston 0. Luton are 1-0 up away to Reading. Millwall 2-0 up at home to Cheltenham Town. Barnsley 2-0 up themselves away to Neil Warnock's Middlesbrough, and Gillingham and Coventry remain scoreless. Fleetwood Town, by the way, are 1-0 up at home to Port Vale. 16 ties in all tonight in the second round of the Carabao Cup.
Adrian, when it comes to Arsenal's business here, Willian's going to be 34, almost 35 when his contract comes to a close. Aubameyang, if he stays for the length of this new deal, will still be there at 34. But I'd imagine from Arsenal's point of view, they could ill afford to lose Aubameyang, because even if they have to pay him when he might be a declining talent, they were going to struggle to buy someone and buy the goals that he's scoring if they had to go into the market.
Yeah, you've probably summed it up quite neatly there. It's, what is he, 31 and signing up for another few years, and you just don't know with a player of that position. But I mean, like you say, if it came down to a straight call of whether they wanted to lose him or not, and maybe the pressure came on, and it tends to do when of players of that age, they're pushing for a longer contract. A year is really no good to him. He'd be better off trying to get a bigger payday maybe somewhere else. But yeah, I wondered, I know Richie said there, and I don't know, was it tongue in your cheek, Richie, when you were saying about Grealish and the rumoured interest from United and elsewhere? I do wonder, because that's the other part of all that, who's actually, they're smiling today and they're signing along the dotted line, my home, my club, etc., etc. How much interest there actually was on taking those players off the respective clubs' hands.
Yeah, with the Grealish thing, he still has that court date hanging over him from his incident early on in lockdown. I was wondering, with that still very much in the mix for him, who'd be interested in signing him, particularly in this window? A year down the line, where it's another story, this might be blown out of the way, but I don't think this summer he was going to go anywhere.
I don't know, Richie. Football, you're applying a lot of morals to the world of football right there.
I am, but I'm applying them to clubs who don't necessarily want to invite that upon themselves, particularly in a window that is already beset by God knows how many controversies and so on. But I just think that is the little thing in the background that may have put off the likes of Manchester United. And I don't know if there were many more in reality who actually were looking to pay the money that Villa were looking for Grealish this summer.
And the England tax very much applied after he made his debut during the international break. Richie, we're going to hear from Gordon Strachan about Gary Breen's comments on Off the Ball last Saturday afternoon in a few minutes' time. But Neil Lennon has addressed his comments about Shane Duffy's move north of the border to play in the SPL.
Yeah, Neil Lennon not happy, unsurprisingly, at Gary Breen's comments regarding Shane Duffy's loan move from Brighton to Celtic. Breen told Saturday's Off the Ball that Duffy's move would see him playing against a lesser standard of player in Scotland. When asked about it today, Lennon wasn't best pleased.
Yeah, I mean, that's just someone who doesn't know the game up here. I could give you a list as long as your arm of players who have come up here today, gone on the better things or had a great career while they've been here. So I think Gary's comments are totally unnecessary, unfounded. There's no sort of substance to them whatsoever, and completely wrong. I think this will be great for Shane's career. I think it'll be great for his profile. I think it'll make him a better player, and that means a better player for Ireland as well.
Two things in that, Adrian, that don't necessarily contradict each other. It could be a good move for Shane Duffy to go to Scotland to get first team football and to be, fit and sharp for the Republic of Ireland. But also what Gary said about facing a lower quality of player can be true at the same time.
It's like, yeah, I don't know. There's been a lot of, there's been so much. This conversation would have been sort of done and dusted, wouldn't it? Like, what did you say, Richie? Was it Saturday's Off the Ball? Jeez, it feels like
Saturday.
Was way longer than that. But like, would have been done and dusted ages ago. Only that, like, we've certainly seen the traffic coming in of people who are not happy with Gary, and Neil Lennon has obviously chipped into it now. But like, I suppose just have a bit more sort of self-belief about your own teams and your own leagues. That I'm not complaining that he's responded to it, but like, it's an inarguable point that the strikers he will face in Scotland will be of a far inferior quality than those he would have been facing week in, week out in the Premier League. There's no debate about that.
Well, he'll take on Edson at Ward at training, and if Morelos manages to stay at Rangers until the end of the transfer window, that's probably two Premier League quality strikers and not a huge amount outside that. Hamilton and coronavirus, Richie?
Yeah, Hamilton confirming today 3 positive coronavirus test results. As a precaution, first team and academy operations have been suspended at the Scottish club while the building there is deep cleaned. The 3 individuals will now self-isolate for 10 days. That's in line with Scottish government rules. Marcel Coetzee is dead for ulcers. Heineken Champions Cup quarter-final away to Toulouse. The Springbok number 8 was dealing with a couple of niggles ahead of the Pro 14 final loss to Leinster, according to his head coach. But Dan McFarland says that they'll give Coetzee every chance to prove his fitness ahead of Sunday's game in France. Some positive news out west as well. Connacht Rugby confirming today that Anne Heenahan has been elected as the province's new president. The Mayo native is the first woman to be appointed to the position at any of the Irish provinces. She stepped up from junior vice president of Connacht in 2018 to the senior vice president role last year. Heenahan is also a judicial officer for World Rugby.
Tell us, Richie, what's up with this Hamilton T-shirt that he wore at the Grand Prix at the weekend and what the issue was?
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton won't be investigated by Formula One's governing body for wearing a T-shirt at the Tuscan Grand Prix about the shooting of Breonna Taylor. It featured the words on the front, "Arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor." On the back it said, "Say her name," with a picture of the slain woman as well. The world champion wore it over his race suit before the race and again on the podium. Plenty of photos of it during the round. The FIA will issue guidelines to drivers about what may and may not be worn. Hamilton, we must stipulate, didn't break any of their rules that are currently on the books. Taylor has been overshot by police in her Kentucky home back in March.
Now, Cork's James Shugru won the Amateur Open 2019. Feels a long time ago
2019,
now.
yeah.
Yeah,
it seems like 18 years ago.
I know. He's in action at the US Open this week.
Yeah, 50-year-old James Suguru has some esteemed company for the opening 2 rounds of this week's US Open. The 2019 amateur champion been grouped with Lee Westwood and the 2-time Masters champion Bubba Watson. Shane Lowry will play alongside Gary Woodland and Suguru's American opposite number, the US amateur champion Andy Ogletree. Rory McIlroy has been grouped with Adam Scott and the 2013 US Open winner Justin Rose. 2010 champion Graham McDowell, he opens up alongside Matt Kuchar and Lucas Glover, the American duo, and the second major of the year gets underway at Winged Foot behind closed doors in New York on Thursday.
I think as the joke went on Twitter earlier today, Ken Livingstone played as many games for Stoke as Anthony Stokes played for Livingston.
Yeah. Livingston and Anthony Stokes agreeing to terminate the player's contract by mutual consent today. The former Sunderland, Celtic and Republic of Ireland striker only joined the Scottish Premiership side earlier on in the summer, but the club say Stokes is struggling to adapt to training on their artificial surface at their stadium and he hasn't been able to get fit in the meantime.
Seems strange. You would have known that before he was joining the club. And finally, Richie, we've got West Brom about to sign a very experienced former Premier League defender.
Yeah, they have signed him, and it seems some competition for Dara O'Shea on the right-hand side of their defence. West Brom completing the signing of former Chelsea defender Branislav Ivanovic today. The 36-year-old signed a one-year deal, having been a free agent after leaving Zenit St. Petersburg. West Brom marked their return to the Premier League with a 3-0 defeat to Leicester that we brought to you live on Sundays Off the Ball.
Okay, one final question for you, Adrian Barry, before we go. It has been posed on text. Is Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang the best Arsenal striker since Thierry Henry?
Oof. Since Thierry Henry, well, I mean, Van Persie is in that category, isn't he? Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look and see what the tallies are. Signing this new 3-year deal, I'd need to have a look and see exactly on the statistically as to whether he is or he isn't, or will or won't be. But certainly signing 3-year contract for a guy who scored, is it like the guts of 80 goals over 110 or 20?
Games.
111 games, yeah.
Yeah, like it's a pretty damn good record, isn't it? And like at a club that, I don't know if that's coming from an Arsenal fan, and if it is, they're not going to be happy with this next comment, but at a club that are ultimately a selling club, it's good business.
Right, feel free to abuse Adrian Barry in 53106. Richie McCormack, your take, Aubameyang, do you put Eduardo in there, do you put Van Persie? Who's the best since Henry?
I'd say it's Aubameyang. I don't think there's really any contest about it. The impact that he's had on that club, like, you take Aubameyang out of that side and they're absolutely nowhere. There's no FA Cup, there's no Community Shield, there's no deep runs into Europe or whatever. Like, he's lifted them up above the level that they were prior to his signing, both him and Lacazette. And I think if he particularly was to go, Arsenal would have found themselves in deep trouble.
Well, if you want to disagree with the guys, you can tweet us as well at Off the Ball. We'll be hearing from Gordon Strachan when we come back from the break. Adrian Barry, Richie McCormack, thanks for joining me. That has been the Newsround. We'll be talking football with Gordon Strachan after these.
I've got everything in front of me. I think I have it. It took me a while to get there.